Thanks everybody for being here. Um, Tonight we're going to read and recite and reflect on the 5 mindfulness trainings. And I know that quite a few of you know what that is, and maybe a lot of you have received the transmission of the 5 mindfulness trainings. But in case you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, I'm going to explain a little bit more. The 5 mindfulness trainings are the guidelines that our teacher Thich Nhat Hanh has spelled out for us to have a joyful, happy, ethical life. And they come from the teachings of the Buddha. Um, Obviously, we in this tradition, we follow the Buddha's teachings as best we can. And so whenever it was 2,600 years ago, the Buddha taught these 5, what he called precepts. And they were very short. When you hear them, you may think they're a lot like the 10 Commandments. They're just 5 of them. But the Buddha taught for people to avoid killing, to avoid stealing, avoid lying, avoid sexual misconduct, and avoid taking in toxins. So our teacher has rewritten these precepts with more information to help us do our best to follow these guidelines or these precepts. So I'm going to pass out these, just go in both directions. And pass them around. I have a few more copies if this is not enough. These copies are ones that I printed the wrong way, so they will be trickier to read. Any more? Okay. So let me just talk a little bit about why we're reading these and kind of the backstory, if you will. After Ty, our teacher, after Ty wrote these mindfulness trainings, he wrote a little, actually he wrote several books that include these trainings, but he was careful to call them trainings because he knew that as human beings, we are not going to be able to perfectly follow even the Buddha's precepts to not kill or lie or steal. They sound like there's something that we could do, but when you begin to look more deeply, you recognize that it's not as simple as you might have thought at the beginning. And so when Thich Nhat Hanh wrote these precepts in a new way, in a way that's kind of relevant to our everyday lives, he included a lot of information that helps us know why we're doing this, and how we can guide ourselves, how we can be guided into following as best we can. You'll notice when we start to read, every one of them begins with aware of the suffering caused by, and then peace. In the first one, for instance, destruction of life. And then after that, he says what we will do our best to do, what we're committed to do, because we have either taken the transmission of these 5 mindfulness trainings, or we've decided that that's the way we want to live our lives. That's the way we want to be. after each of these, after we read each one of these, I will ring the bell, and then I will say, actually, um, I've got the process in, anyway, it's not that way. After we read each one of these, I will say, have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it for the last month? Now, if you have taken 5 mindfulness trainings, then you can in your mind think, yes, I have, or I could improve a little bit. It's not a time to criticize or judge yourself. It's just a way to reflect on what you've been able to do. And a lot of times you will find when you reflect that there are moments when you have actually done pretty well, and you might surprise yourself that you've actually been following this particular training pretty well. So that is a part of the process. And before we read each one, there will be a bell. So I would really like for someone from the group, from the Sangha, to read each of the trainings. So let's just decide who would like to read the first training called Reverence. Okay, thank you, June. Who would like to read the second one, True Happiness? Okay. Thank you, Corey. The third one, True Love. It's true. The fourth one, Loving Speech and Deep Listening. Good. All right, Jake. And the fifth one, Nourishment and Healing. Oh, okay. Way in the back. We have some empty cushions up here.
Yeah, it comes to the front wheel.
You want to sit up here?
Jim, you want to?
Right. Okay. So on your paper, you see the 5 mindfulness trainings, so I will read that part. The 5 mindfulness trainings represent the Buddhist vision for a global spirituality and ethic. They are a concrete expression of the Buddhist teachings on the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of right understanding and true love, leading to healing, transformation, and happiness for ourselves and for the world. To practice the 5 mindfulness trainings is to cultivate the insight of interbeing, or right view, which can remove all discrimination, intolerance, anger, fear, and despair. If we live according to the 5 mindfulness trainings, we are already on the path of a bodhisattva. Knowing we are on that path, we're not lost in confusion about our life in the present or in fears about the future. Life.
Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I am committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world in my thinking or in my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, which in turn come from dualistic and discriminative thinking, I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world.
This is the first of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it during the last month? Second mindfulness training, true happiness.
Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, I am committed to practicing generosity in my thinking, speaking, and acting. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. And I will share my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. I will practice looking deeply to see that the happiness and the suffering of others are not separate from my own happiness and suffering. That true happiness is not possible without understanding and compassion. And that running after wealth, fame, power, and sensual pleasures can bring much suffering and despair. I am aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions, and that I can live happily in the present moment simply by remembering that I already have more than enough conditions to be happy. I am committed to practicing right livelihood so that I can help reduce the suffering of living beings on Earth and stop contributing to climate change.
This is the second of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it during the last month? Love.
Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, and committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. Knowing that sexual desire is not love, and that sexual activity motivated by craving always harms myself as well as others, I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual consent, true love, and a deep, long-term commitment. I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity of my relationship from family members, friends, and Sangha with whom there is support and trust. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. Seeing that body and mind are interrelated, I am committed to learn appropriate ways to take care of my sexual energy and to cultivate the 4 basic elements of true love: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness for the greater happiness of myself and others. Recognizing the diversity of human experience, I am committed not to discriminate against any form of gender identity or sexual orientation. Practicing true love, we know that we will continue beautifully into the future.
This is the third of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it during the last month? Loving speech and deep listening.
Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and to promote reconciliation, peace, myself, and among other people. Ethnic and religious groups and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truthfully using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of a difficult situation. I'm determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and the fear that lie deep in my consciousness.
This is the fourth of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it during the last month? Nourishment and healing.
Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I will practice looking deeply into how I consume the 4 kinds of nutrients, namely edible foods, sense impressions, volition, and consciousness. I'm determined not to gamble or to use alcohol, drugs, or any other products which contain toxins, such as certain websites, electronic games, TV programs, films, magazines, books, and conversations. I will practice coming back to the present moment to be in touch with the refreshing, healing, and nourishing elements in me and around me, not letting regrets and sorrow drag me back into the past, nor letting anxiety, fear, or craving pull me out of the present moment. I'm determined not to cover up my loneliness, anxiety, or other suffering by losing myself in consumption. I will contemplate interbeing and consume in a way that preserves peace, joy, and well-being in my body and consciousness, and in the collective body and consciousness of my family, my society, and the earth.
This is the 5th of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, practice, and observe it during the last? Thank you, dear Sangha. We have completed our recitation of the 5 mindfulness trainings. And we have an opportunity to reflect and share. I think that what I would like is for us to kind of get together with a small group of people around you to share what you've noticed, and then we will come back together and share with the whole group. But let me say a couple more things. First of all, I want to emphasize again that these are guidelines. We are never, ever going to be able to do all of the things that are here. But what we can do is commit to do our best and to observe how we are living our lives and notice the ways that we are not following them. That's actually very important, to notice the things that you're not really doing. Because, you know, if you're not aware of something, you can't do anything about it. So awareness is very important. And that's one of the things I think are, one of the things for me, or that are very helpful in these trainings. I like that he called them trainings, because we're just training our minds to be mindful. And that's that's the purpose of these trainings, to train ourselves. The other thing I'd like to emphasize is that there is a connection between all of these trainings. So if you were to choose one of them that kind of spoke to you, for instance, one of the things that always kind of hits me in my heart is the fourth one, loving speech and deep listening. And so if I, for instance, just determined that this is the one I was going to concentrate on, what I would discover and what I have discovered is that I kind of am practicing all of them because they're interrelated. So you don't have to worry about doing all of them. That's a lot. One time we were reading these in the Wednesday night group, and a friend of mine, after we were reading them, she said, "That's a lot of words." And it is a lot of words. And so don't be bogged down by the words, but look for the intent and look for the things that kind of speak to you, speak to your heart about things that you might be able to improve on or things that you notice that you're already doing. And maybe you're doing them very well. So allow yourselves to feel that and see that as well. It's not meant to criticize ourselves or judge ourselves or other people, but it's meant to help us be aware of the suffering caused by these things and then make a commitment to do what we can to ameliorate that, to make it better, to make our lives better and the lives of everyone we meet. So I think you could figure out, like, just combine with the first group and the people in the chairs, or just, probably about 3 people would be good for you to team up with. And just discuss the trainings, and especially think about, since this is the new year, reflect on perhaps how things have gone in the past year, and maybe some of the things that you might do in this year that would make this new year fun, more joyful. Okay, so let's start to share with one another. And I will ring the bell in about 15 minutes and we'll come back together.